Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and welcome back to this next video. And this is the first video in the course on the molecular biology. In the introductory video of this particular course, I gave you the outline of the course, and this is the first video that we are going to start in this particular course. So, we are going to start the course with the prokaryotic versus the eukaryotic cells. So, you might be wondering, why are we starting the course with the prokaryotic versus the eukaryotic cell? Because when you look at the major processes that we discuss in a course on molecular biology, like the DNA replication, the transcription, the translation, or the regulation of the gene expression, that are happening in both the prokaryotic versus the eukaryotic cells. But there are differences in these processes when you talk about the prokaryotic or the eukaryotic cells. And understanding these differences, they are very important for the human beings, and I'll give you a lot of example of why understanding these references, they are good for the life of the human beings. So we are going to start with the cells. So the cells, they are the basic building blocks of all living organisms. And if you look at this particular image, you can see that these cells, they come in various shapes and sizes. For example, if you compare the shape of the neuron with that of the pollen grain, or with that of the algae, you can see the differences in shapes of these cells. Similarly, these cells, they come in different sizes. Like, for example, if you compare the size of the bacteria with that of the smooth muscle cells, you can clearly see that the smooth muscle cells, they are the bigger cells as compared to the bacteria cells. But fundamentally, the cells, they can be classified into two major types. One, they are known as the prokaryotic cells, and the other one, they are known as the eukaryotic cells. If you talk about these cells, like this is the journal diagram of the animal cells, and you can see the different components present in the eukaryotic cell. This one is a eukaryotic cell, but generally, to give you an idea what the cells do, whether that is a prokaryotic cell or that is a eukaryotic cell, is that the cells, they are the smallest unit of life, whether that is a prokaryotic or a eukaryotic cell. And what these cells do is that they are going to replicate independently. They are going to make their daughter cells, and they are going to contain the genetic material of the organism. And this genetic material, that is very important for the replication, as well as all of the physiological processes that are happening in that particular cells. Thirdly, these cells, they are responsible for carrying out all of the life processes, whether that is a prokaryotic cell or that is a eukaryotic cell. So we are going to start our discussion on the prokaryotic cell, and focusing on the structure of a prokaryotic cell. Now, this is an electron micrograph of the famous Escherichia coli. And if you can see this image, you can see the shape of the E. coli in this particular electron micrograph. And this is the generalized structure of a prokaryotic cell. So the prokaryotic cell, they contain the cytoplasm, they have the nucleoid DNA, you've got the ribosomes, the pilus, the flagellum, the capsule, the cell wall, and the plasma membrane. So this is the generalized structure of a prokaryotic cell. When we talk about the functions and the characteristics of a prokaryotic cell, so the prokaryotic cell, they reproduce asexually through the binary fission. And if I give you a simple diagram explaining the binary fission, so the parent cell, that duplicate its DNA, it divides its cytoplasm, and the parent cell, it divide into two daughter cells. So the prokaryotics, they are the prokaryotes, and they are going to reproduce asexually through the binary fission. Secondly, these prokaryotic cells, they are typically smaller than the eukaryotic cells, and you can see the size differences between the two. So the prokaryote, they are usually 1 to 10 micron. The eukaryotic cells, they are from like 5 to 100 micron. And the prokaryotic cell, they have got a simple internal organization, but the simple internal organization doesn't mean that they are not complex, because when you talk about these prokaryotic cells, despite their simplicity, they are highly efficient and adaptable, thriving in diverse environments. Let me give you some example about their adaptability and their thriving in diverse environments. For example, these prokaryotic cells, they can be found in soil. The examples would be the Bacillus subtilis, that is present in the soil, and that is known for its role its role in decomposing organic matter. The species of the streptomyces, they are very famous for producing the antibiotics. The second habitat, that would be the water. For example, if you talk about the cyanobacteria, these photosynthetic bacteria that are found in freshwater and marine environments. And if you talk about the Vibrio cholera, that is found in the contaminated water, and that is responsible for causing cholera in the human beings. The third habitat that you can see, that would be the human gut, and you can have a lot of prokaryotic cells. For example, the Escherichia coli, that is a common bacterium in the human intestine, and that is very essential for the human digestion. Another habitat, the hot springs. The Thermus aquaticus would be one of the examples that thrives in the hot spring, and that is known for its heat resistant enzymes. If you have ever heard about the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction, where we use the tag polymerase, so we isolate that particular tag polymerase, which is heat resistant, from the Thermus aquaticus. Another important example, that will be the sulfolobus acidocaldarius, that is found in acidic hot springs, and it metabolizes sulfur. Another diverse habitat where you can find these prokaryotic cell, that would be the deep sea hydrothermal vents. And if I give you an example of that, that would be the Pyrolobus fumarii, which is an extremophile bacteria that thrive in high pressure, high temperature environment of the hydrothermal vents. They can also be found, these prokaryotic cells can also be found in the Arctic and the Antarctic ice. An example would be the Psychrobacter arcticus, and that is a cold tolerant bacteria found in Arctic and the Antarctic ice. Now just look at these two. This one is an extremophile bacteria that is present in high pressure and high temperature environment. This one is present in the ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic ice. So you can imagine the diversity in the prokaryotic cells. They can be found in the human skin. For example, the Staphylococcus epidermidis, which is a commensal bacterium found on the human skin, usually harmless but can cause infection if it enters the body. The Propionibacterium acnes, that live in the sebaceous glands of the skin, and that is associated with acne. Another example, that would be the plants. The Rhizobium bacteria, they are very important. They are in symbiotic association with the root nodules of the legumes, fixing nitrogen for them. Agrobacterium tumefaciens, which causes the crown gall disease in plants by transferring DNA to these plant cells. Salt flats, for example, the Halobacterium salinarum, that is a halophilic bacteria found in extremely salty environment like the salt flats. They can also be found in the deserts. For example, the Deinococcus radiodurans, which is known for its resistance to radiation, that is found in desert environment and other extreme conditions. Now, these are just some of the examples which demonstrate the incredible adaptability of the bacteria of the prokaryotic cells, allowing them to inhabit virtually every corner on the earth. And we can use this diversity for our purpose. We can use this diversity for the benefit of the human being. And I just give you one example, that from the Thermus aquaticus, we isolate the enzyme which is heat resistant, and we can use them in the process of the polymerase chain reaction. Now let us talk about the structure of the eukaryotic cells. So when you talk about the eukaryotic cell, you usually talk about the plant cells, or we usually talk about the animal cells. Of course, there are differences between the two, but most of the components in the animal cells and in the plant cells, they are common. For example, both of them, they have got the ribosomes, the lysosomes, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the rough and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, the cell membrane. Of course, you do not have cell wall in the animal cell, but that is present in the plant cell as well. So when you talk about the eukaryotic cell, they have got a well-defined nucleus, which is enclosed by a nuclear membrane where the genetic material that is stored. For example, if you look at this one, if this is your nucleus, you can actually see over here the genetic material that would be present in the nucleus, and you can see a clear-cut nucleus over here as well. Secondly, these eukaryotic cell, They contain various membrane-bound organelles like the mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, the lysosomes in both of the animals and the plant cells. There can be specialized membrane-bound organelles in the plant cell as well. For example, the chloroplasts. If you talk about the functions and the characteristics of the eukaryotic cells, so they reproduce through the process of the mitosis and meiosis, in contrast to the binary fission that we just saw in the prokaryotic cells. The mitosis would be very much similar to the process of the binary fission. So if I give you the differences between the two, so the mitosis that starts with the 2n, and you are going to have two daughter cells again with a genetic makeup of 2n. When you talk about the meiosis, you start with the 2n, and at the end of the day, you are going to have four haploid daughter cells, which are having the 1n genetic material in contrast to the 2n of their parent. Secondly, these eukaryotic cells, they are typically larger than the prokaryotic cells. I just gave you the discussion in the prokaryotic as well. And when you talk about the eukaryotic cell, they are more complex structures as in comparison to the prokaryotic cells, and they allow for specialized functions and the information of the multicellular organisms. For example, one of the important specialized functions that you can see is the formation of these multicellular organisms. So these prokaryotic cells, most of the time, they are like unicellular. They are made of single cells. But when you talk about the multicellular organism, so different cells combine to form tissue, tissues combine to form an organ system, and then you are going to have a complex organism like the human being. So this one is, you can see this complexity that is a major feature of the eukaryotic cells. So this is the first video in this particular course, and in the next video I'm going to give you a tabulated difference between the prokaryotics and the eukaryotic cells, and I'm going to tell you that why are we discussing the differences between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and how can we exploit these differences between the prokaryotics and the eukaryotic cells for the benefit of the human beings.